Standing on stage, I read the comment, "You are not even a real doctor." The reserved seating below sat empty. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a photo of them toasting champagne in Greece, captioned, "Family time is the best time." I had paid $14,000 for their flight here, but their absence did not shock me. I knew they would do this, so I had prepared a different kind of graduation ceremony just for them. My name is Peyton Martin, and as the dean of the Redwood Harbor School of Medicine leaned into the microphone, his voice boomed through the auditorium speakers, distorting slightly with the feedback. Peyton Martin, it was just 2 words, 2 syllables followed by 2 more, a name I had written on thousands of exam pages, on endless intake forms, on prescription pads during my residency, and on the lease of an apartment I barely saw because I was always at the hospital. But hearing it now, amplified against the hush of 2,000 people, it sounded foreign. It sounded like a question rather than a statement. I stepped forward. The stage lights were blinding, white and hot, designed to make us look radiant for the photographs that would hang on walls we would one day own. I felt the weight of the doctoral hood settling on my shoulders, the heavy fabric pulling slightly backward, choking me just a little. The dean smiled, a practiced, politician's smile that did not reach his eyes, and extended a hand that was damp with the sweat of shaking 500 other hands before mine. "Congratulations, Doctor," he said, the words automatic. "Thank you," I replied. My voice was steady, my pulse was not. I took the diploma. It was a heavy leather binder, smooth and cool to the touch. I turned to face the audience, programmed by rehearsal to smile, to wave, to acknowledge the village that had raised me. The flashbulbs popped like miniature lightning storms in the cavernous hall. A roar of applause washed over the stage, a generic wave of noise. But I was not listening to the general applause. I was listening for the specific, piercing whistles of a father, the shout of a sister, the enthusiastic clapping of a mother. I looked down. I knew exactly where to look. I had spent 45 minutes on the phone with the event coordinator 3 months ago to secure the tickets. Row G, seats 4, 5, 6, and 7, the family reserved section. It was the prime viewing angle. Center stage. Close enough to see the sweat on the graduates' foreheads, but far enough back to get a good angle for a camera. I found row G. It was a gap in the smile of the audience, a void. 4 seats, upholstered in plush crimson velvet, sat completely empty. On the back of each chair, a white laminate card was taped. Even from this distance, I knew what they said because I had paid for the printing, reserved for the family of Peyton Martin. The cards were stark white against the red, looking less like reservations and more like tombstones. To my left, a family was standing up, screaming for the graduate behind me. A father was weeping openly, holding a bouquet of roses that had already started to wilt in the heat. To my right, a mother was recording on an iPad, her face glowing with pride. In the center, there was just empty space. My space. I lowered my hand. I did not wave. I walked across the remainder of the stage, the heels I had bought specifically for this moment, clicking a hollow rhythm on the hardwood floor. I descended the stairs, clutching the diploma so hard my knuckles turned white. I walked past the other graduates, past the beaming parents, past the faculty, and out the side exit into the cool, dim corridor of the convention center. The air out here smelled of floor wax and old coffee. I leaned against the concrete block wall and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that I had been holding since they called the letter M. My phone buzzed in the hidden pocket of my gown. It was a single vibration, then another, then a cascade. For a split second, a foolish, childish part of my brain lit up. They are here, it thought. They are just late. Traffic. A flat tire. They are texting to say they are running through the lobby right now. I pulled the phone out. The screen brightness was set to maximum, stinging my eyes in the low light. It was not a text message from my father saying he was parking the car. It was a notification from social media. Uncle Ray, Raymond Halston, my mother's brother. A man who had not held a steady job since the late 90s but always had an opinion on how I should spend my residency stipend. He had commented on the photo the medical school had automatically posted to my timeline just moments ago, a live feed capture of me crossing the stage. I stared at the words. "You are not even a real doctor." I blinked. I read it again. "You are not even a real doctor." It was just 7 words, typed out by a man who likely had beer foam on his upper lip at 2 in the afternoon. It was petty. It was factually incorrect. The degree in my hand said Doctor of Medicine, but it was not the comment that made my stomach turn over. It was the timing. He was watching. They were all watching. They were online, active, present in the digital world, while my physical world remained empty. Then, the feed refreshed. A new photo appeared at the top of my timeline, posted 2 minutes ago. The colors were so vibrant they looked oversaturated. The water in the background was a piercing, impossible turquoise. The sky was a cloudless azure. In the foreground, 3 people stood on a white stone terrace overlooking the sea. My mother, Diane, wearing a flowing white linen dress and a wide-brimmed hat, holding a flute of champagne. My father, Calvin, in a polo shirt that I had bought him for Christmas, his face flushed with sun and drink. My sister, Gemma, posing with her signature tilt of the head, looking like she was in a magazine spread, a pair of oversized sunglasses perched on her nose. They were smiling. Not the polite, tight-lipped smiles they saved for my achievements, but genuine, radiant, teeth-baring smiles. They looked relaxed. They looked rich. They looked happy. The location tag read, Santorini, Greece. The caption, written by my mother, read, "Family time is the best time." I felt a physical blow to my chest, as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into my ribs. I stared at the timestamp, 2 minutes ago, while I was walking across the stage, wondering if they were stuck in traffic on the interstate. They were raising glasses on a Greek island, 6,000 miles away. I scrolled up. There was a text message from Gemma. Delivered 3 hours ago. I had been in the robbing room, phone off, preparing for the procession. I had missed it until now. "We cannot make it." Something came up. "Love you." Something came up. I looked back at the photo. The something appeared to be a 5-star resort and a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the concrete wall. I did not call them. I could imagine the conversation if I did. My mother would answer, her voice thick with feigned static, claiming the reception was bad. My father would make a joke about how I was too uptight. Gemma would say I was ruining their vibe. Instead, I went cold. It was a terrifying sensation. Usually, when hurt, I cried. I was a crier. I cried when patients died. I cried when I failed my first anatomy quiz. I cried when I was tired, but this was different. The tears evaporated before they could form. My heart rate, which had been hammering against my ribs, slowed down to a rhythmic, predatory thud. I swiped the notification away. I turned off the screen. I put the phone back in my pocket. I walked out of the convention center, bypassed the reception where I was supposed to mingle with my peers, and hailed a cab. I did not want to drive. I sat in the back of the taxi, watching the city roll by, the gray pavement reflecting the gray sky. When I got to my apartment, it was silent. It was a small place, clean, clinical, filled with textbooks and empty coffee mugs. I walked into the bedroom and hung my graduation gown on the back of the desk chair. It looked like a deflated black ghost. I placed the diploma on the desk, right next to a stack of unpaid utility bills. Then, I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside sat a pristine white envelope. I reached in and pulled out the contents. They were printed on heavy, high-quality paper. I had printed them myself at the hospital library because I wanted them to look official. I wanted them to be a gift. Receipts, itineraries, confirmation numbers. I spread them out on the desk surface. Skycrest Air, business class. 4 passengers, departure, May 4th, return May 10th. I ran my finger over the total cost at the bottom of the page. The ink was black and sharp. $14,240.50. I spoke the number aloud to the empty room. $14,000. That money was not a gift from a trust fund. It was not a loan from a bank. It was every single extra shift I had taken in the last 2 years. It was Christmas Day in the emergency room. It was Thanksgiving in the burn unit. It was sleeping in my car between rotations because driving home would take 20 minutes I did not have. I had paid for their flights. I had paid for their hotel suites near the medical school, 2 suites at the Ritz, because Gemma said she could not sleep in a standard room. I had paid for the rental car, a luxury SUV because my father had back problems. I looked at the dates. May 4th. That was 2 days ago. They had used the tickets. But they had not flown to Redwood Harbor. I sat down in the chair, the leather creaking under me. My mind, usually cluttered with differential diagnoses and drug interactions, became singular and sharp. They did not just miss my graduation. They did not just forget. This was a calculated redirection. You do not accidentally end up in Greece when your ticket says California. They had taken my gift, my $14,000, my sacrifice, and they had traded it in. They had likely used the credits, the flexibility of the business class fare I had insisted on buying just in case of emergencies, to book a vacation for themselves. And they had done it while I was scrubbing into surgery last week, too busy to check my email for the rerouting notifications. "You are not even a real doctor," Uncle Ray had said. "Family time is the best time." My mother had written. They viewed me as a utility. I was the faucet that poured money when they were thirsty. I was the generator that kept their lights on, and like any utility, I was ignored until I stopped working, or until they found a better use for the resources I provided. I looked at the family photo on my desk taken 4 years ago when I got into medical school. They were smiling there, too. But now, looking at it, I saw the tightness in my father's jaw. I saw the way Gemma was standing slightly in front of me, blocking half my body. I saw the way my mother's hand was on Gemma's shoulder, while I stood alone on the edge of the frame. I had spent my entire life trying to buy my way into the center of that frame. I thought if I was smart enough, successful enough, rich enough, generous enough, they would finally pull me in. I thought $14,000 was the price of admission to their love. I was wrong. $14,000 was just the price of the ticket. They had taken the ticket and left me at the gate. A cold smile touched my lips. It felt foreign on my face. "If they want me to be just an ATM," I whispered to the silence, "then I will show them the bank statement of my life." I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the dark room. I right-clicked on the desktop and created a new folder. I typed the name slowly, savoring each keystroke. RECEIPTS. I opened my banking app. I opened my email. I opened the cloud storage drive where I kept my digital life. Then, I navigated to a subfolder I had created 6 months ago, buried deep in a directory of old medical lectures. It contained a single audio file. It was a recording from the smart speaker in my parents' living room, a device I had set up for them, a device that was still logged into my account because my mother claimed she did not know how to do the tech stuff. I had only listened to the first 10 seconds of it back in December before I turned it off, too hurt to hear the rest. It had been an accidental recording, triggered by a phrase that sounded like the wake word. I clicked on the file. I dragged it into the receipts folder. I did not listen to it yet. I knew I would need to be stronger to hear what they said when they thought I was not around. But today, staring at the empty chair where my graduation gown hung, I felt strong. I felt the kind of strength that comes when you have nothing left to lose, because the people you were afraid of losing have already left you. I sat back, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. The graduation was over. The party was in Greece. But the real ceremony was just beginning, and I was going to be the one calling the names, to understand why I did not scream when I saw the photos of Santorini. You have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. I'm not talking about the physical structure, though that was impressive enough. The Martin residence in Cedar Hollow was a sprawling 2-story colonial with white shutters and a manicured lawn that my father, Calvin, obsessed over with the precision of a surgeon. But the real architecture was invisible. It was a structure built of expectations, silence, and a brutal hierarchy that was never spoken aloud but was understood by everyone who crossed the threshold. In the Martin household, there were two distinct categories of people. There were the stars, and there was the support staff. My mother, Diane, and my father, Calvin, were the directors of the show, to the outside world, to the neighbors who waved as they drove their sedans down our tree-lined street. They were the perfect parents. They volunteered at the church bake sale. My father coached the Little League team for one season, just long enough to get a plaque. My mother hosted the neighborhood book club, where she served Chardonnay and laughed at all the right moments. They were polite. They were polished. They were aggressively normal. But the moment the heavy oak front door clicked shut, the warmth evaporated. It was like walking from a sunlit patio into a meat locker. Then there was Gemma. My sister was 2 years younger than me, but she took up all the oxygen in every room. Gemma was the star. She was born with a kind of magnetic pull that demanded attention. She was loud. She was dramatic. And she was beautiful in a way that required maintenance. If Gemma had a headache, the entire house went into lockdown. If Gemma had a heartbreak, my mother was there with ice cream and soothing words, stroking her hair for hours on end. And then there was me. I was the other one. I was the support staff. I was not abused. I want to make that clear because people often look for scars to justify the kind of coldness I carry. I was never beaten. I was never starved. I was simply useful. My role was defined early on. I was the one who remembered to take the trash out on Tuesdays. I was the one who knew where the spare batteries were kept. I was the one who tutored Gemma in algebra because she could not be bothered to study. And my parents did not want her grades to slip below the threshold for cheerleading. I remember dinners at the kitchen table. The table was mahogany, always polished to a shine that reflected the chandelier above. We had assigned seats. My father sat at the head, of course. My mother sat to his right. Gemma sat to his left. I sat at the far end, opposite my father, a distance that felt like miles. "Gemma, tell us about the play auditions," my mother would say, her eyes bright, and Gemma would launch into a 20-minute monologue about the drama teacher, the other girls, the costume she wanted. She would wave her fork for emphasis, and my parents would watch her like she was a television screen. They laughed when she made a joke. They nodded when she complained. When Gemma finally stopped for a breath, there would be a brief silence. My mother would take a sip of her wine, look at her watch, and then glance at me. "Pass the salt. Peyton," she would say. That was it. That was my contribution to the family narrative. I was the mechanism by which the salt moved from one end of the table to the other. There is a specific memory that stands out, sharp as a scalpel in my mind. It was my 16th birthday. In American culture, turning 16 is a monument. It is the gateway to adulthood, to driving, to freedom. I came downstairs that morning dressed in a new sweater I had bought with my own babysitting money. I walked into the kitchen, my heart doing a little hopeful flutter. My father was reading the financial section of the newspaper. My mother was on the phone with the caterer for a charity gala she was organizing. Gemma was eating toast and scrolling through her phone. "Morning," I said. My father grunted without looking up. My mother held up a finger, signaling me to be quiet while she negotiated the price of shrimp cocktails. Gemma did not look up. I poured myself a bowl of cereal. I ate it standing up at the counter because Gemma had spread her textbooks out over my place setting. I washed my bowl. I put it in the drying rack. "I am going to catch the bus," I said. "Have a good day," my father said, turning the page. "Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning on your way back. The ticket is on the fridge." I walked to the bus stop in the rain. I sat through 6 hours of classes. I took a chemistry test. I came home. I picked up the dry cleaning 3 of my father's suits and 2 of Gemma's dresses. I walked the mile from the cleaners to the house, the plastic hangers digging into my fingers. When I walked in, the house was empty. There was a note on the counter. Went to dinner at the club with the Hendersons. Leftovers in the fridge. Make sure Gemma finishes her history essay when she gets back from dance. Mom. I stood there in the silent kitchen, holding the dry cleaning. It was 7 in the evening. My 16th birthday was 3/4 over, and the only acknowledgement I had received was a chore. I did not cry. Even then, at 16, I knew that crying was a waste of hydration. I heated up the leftovers meatloaf, dry and cold in the center. I ate it alone. 2 years later, for Gemma's 16th birthday, my parents rented a ballroom at the local country club. There was a DJ. There was a chocolate fountain. My father gave a speech about how Gemma brought so much light into their lives. He bought her a brand new convertible, a red one, with a giant white bow on the hood. I stood in the back of the ballroom, holding the gift bag I was in charge of guarding. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came up to me. "Your sister is such a delight," she said, shouting over the music. "You must be so proud." "Yes," I said. "She is very special. And what are you up to these days?" "Peyton. I just got accepted into the pre-med program at the State University," I said. It was the first time I had told anyone outside the immediate family. Mrs. Gable blinked, her eyes glazing over. "Oh, that sounds hard. Well, make sure you get a piece of cake before it is gone." She walked away. That night, as we were cleaning up because while Gemma drove her new car home, I stayed behind to help load the gifts into my mother's SUV. I tried to mention my acceptance letter again. "Mom," I said as I lifted a heavy box of presents into the trunk, "I got the letter today. From the university, I got in, with a partial scholarship." My mother paused, checking her lipstick in the rearview mirror. She pressed her lips together to even out the color. "That is good, Peyton," she said. Her tone was the same one she used when the housekeeper did a decent job on the windows. "Very sensible. We will not have to worry about you." She closed her compact. "Make sure you congratulate Gemma when we get home." She was a little upset that the DJ did not play her favorite song fast enough. She needs a boost. I sat in the back seat on the way home, surrounded by Gemma's gifts. I realized then that in their eyes, my achievements were not points of pride. They were simply the absence of problems. I was a good investment because I did not cost them emotional energy. I was low maintenance. I was the reliable sedan that started every morning, while Gemma was the vintage sports car that broke down constantly but looked spectacular in the driveway. My father had a way of cementing this dynamic. He did not use emotional manipulation like my mother. He used logic, cold, corporate logic. When I told him I wanted to be a doctor, he did not ask me why. He did not ask if I wanted to help people. He nodded, did a mental calculation, and looked me in the eye. "Good," he said. "Doctors make good money, stable, recession-proof. Keep going. Peyton, it will be useful for the whole family later on." Useful for the family. He planted that seed when I was 18. He watered it every semester when I showed him my dean's list grades. He did not see a daughter excelling. He saw a retirement plan maturing. He saw a future where I would pay for the nursing home, where I would handle the medical bills, where I would be the safety net that allowed them to spoil Gemma forever. I learned to be silent. I learned that silence was the currency I had to pay to live in that house. If I was quiet, if I was self-sufficient, if I fixed things before they broke, I was allowed to stay. If I complained, I was difficult. If I asked for attention, I was jealous. "Why can't you be more supportive of your sister?" My mother would ask if I ever pointed out the unfairness. "She needs us more than you do. You are strong. Peyton, you are the rock." Being called the rock is not a compliment. A rock is something you step on to cross a river. A rock is something you leave outside in the rain. A rock is inanimate. It does not have feelings. It just sits there and bears the weight. But the most twisted part, the part that kept me trapped for so long, was that they did not hate me. If they had hated me, I could have left. Hate is a hot, active emotion. It pushes you away. No, they did not hate me. They needed me. They needed someone to edit Gemma's college essays, which I did, rewriting them entirely until she got into a communications program she never finished. They needed someone to drive them to the airport at 4 in the morning so they did not have to pay for parking. They needed someone to lend my father $2,000 when he made a bad stock trade and did not want my mother to know a loan he never paid back. They loved me the way a carpenter loves his hammer. They kept me in the toolbox, dark and quiet, until there was a nail that needed striking. And I let them. I let them because I thought there was a threshold. I thought that if I achieved enough, if I rose high enough, if I became something undeniable like a doctor of medicine, the dynamic would shift. I thought that the title of doctor would force them to look at me with the same awe they reserved for Gemma's latest haircut. That was why I bought the tickets. That was why I spent $14,000. I was not just buying airfare, I was buying a stage. I wanted to bring them to Redwood Harbor, sit them in those plush seats, and force them to watch me ascend. I wanted to stand on that stage, look down at them, and see, for the first time in my life, that I was the protagonist of the scene. I convinced myself that graduation would be the day the slate was wiped clean. I told myself, this is it. This is the moment. They will come, they will see the dean shake my hand, they will hear the applause, and finally, they will understand who I am. I wanted to believe it so bad that I ignored the data. I ignored the fact that my mother asked if the hotel had a spa before she asked when the ceremony started. I ignored the fact that Gemma asked if there were any hot guys in my graduating class, rather than asking about my specialty. I ignored the way my father asked if the flight was refundable. Just in case, I sat in my apartment the night before graduation, staring at the 4 tickets I had printed out on heavy cardstock. I had wrapped them in a gold ribbon. I had presented them at Christmas like an offering to minor gods. This time, I had whispered to myself in the mirror as I brushed my teeth, this time, I will be seen. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach where the anxiety lived, there was a cold, heavy stone. It was the intuition I had honed over 26 years of living in the shadow of their indifference. It was a small voice that sounded remarkably like my own, whispering a warning I refused to hear. They are not coming for you. Peyton, they are coming for the trip. And if a better trip comes along, you will be back in the toolbox before you can blink. I pushed that voice down. I drowned it in studying and shifts at the hospital. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that $14,000 was enough to buy a new reality. I was wrong. You cannot buy a new reality. You can only pay for the exposure of the old one. And now, with the receipts on my desk and the silence of the apartment pressing in on me, the flashback ended. The kitchen table was gone. The dry cleaning bags were gone. The red convertible was gone. All that was left was the truth. They had a hierarchy. I was at the bottom, and I had just financed their celebration of that fact. I looked at the folder on my laptop screen. Receipts. I was done being the rock. Rocks are heavy. Rocks can sink ships. And if they wanted to treat me like an inanimate object, they were about to learn what happens when that object creates an obstruction they cannot simply step over. Medical school is not designed for the weak, and it is certainly not designed for the poor. It is a war of attrition where the enemy is your own body's need for sleep. For 4 years, and then the brutal years of residency that followed. My life was measured in 15-minute increments. I learned to sleep standing up in an elevator. I learned to eat a protein bar in 3 bites while running to a code blue. I learned the specific, cloying smell of cauterized flesh and the sharp, metallic tang of stress sweat. But while I was learning how to restart a heart and how to suture a laceration with hands that would not stop shaking, I was also learning a secondary curriculum. I was learning the exact exchange rate of familial affection. It started small. It always does. During my 2nd year of medical school, I was living on student loans that were terrifying in their magnitude. I was eating instant noodles 3 times a day. I was reusing coffee grounds. And then the text came from my mother. The furnace died. Dad is stressing out. He says he does not know how we will get through the winter. It is going to be so cold. There was no direct request. There never was. My mother was a master of the implied ask. She simply presented the tragedy and left a silence for me to fill. And because I had been trained to be the fixer, the useful one, the rock, I filled it. I transferred $2,000 from my loan disbursement. That money was supposed to cover my rent for 3 months. Instead, it bought a new blower motor for the HVAC system in Cedar Hollow. "Oh, thank goodness," my mother texted back. "You saved us." That phrase, "you saved us," was more addictive than any narcotic I had access to in the hospital pharmacy. It was a hit of dopamine. For 10 seconds, I was not the invisible daughter. I was the savior. But the high faded, and the requests kept coming. In my 3rd year, it was the transmission on my father's truck. $1,500. I picked up extra shifts transcribing notes for an attending physician to pay for it. In my 4th year, right before match day, it was a medical emergency for Gemma. She called me, sobbing, saying she was in a hole and needed help. I panicked. I thought she was sick. I thought she was in trouble. I sent $800 immediately. 2 days later, she posted a photo on Instagram from a music festival, wearing a designer outfit that looked brand new. When I confronted her, she sent a string of crying face emojis. "I needed this for my mental health. Pay. You do not understand the pressure I am under. Thanks for being the best big sis." She used emojis to ask, and she used silence to thank. Once the transfer was complete, the communication line went dead. I would text to ask if she was okay, if she had enough to eat, and I would get left on red. The transaction was complete. The customer had left the store. My father was different. He did not ask for help. He framed it as an investment. "We have a doctor in the family now," he would say to his friends at the Sunday barbecues I occasionally made at home for, usually so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. He would clap a heavy hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a farmer inspecting a prize cow. "It is like a lifetime insurance policy. We put the work in, and now we reap the rewards." He never said "you reap the rewards." He said we. I was a resident when he asked for $5,000. He called it a temporary liquidity issue regarding a property tax assessment. "I will pay you back as soon as the bonus comes in next quarter," he said. His voice was firm, businesslike. I wrote the check. I was working 80-hour weeks. I was dealing with patients who screamed at me, patients who bled on me, patients who died despite everything I did. I was drowning in 6 figures of student debt, but I wrote the check because saying no to Calvin Martin was like trying to stop a freight train with a piece of paper. The next quarter came and went. The bonus came and went. I never saw the money. When I gently brought it up 6 months later, he laughed. A sharp, barking sound. "Come on, Peyton. Do not be petty. Consider it your contribution to the house that raised you. You are making doctor money now. Do not be greedy." Doctor money. I was making $14 an hour if you broke down my resident salary by the actual hours I worked. I was driving a Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper that I could not afford to fix. I was buying my scrubs at a discount outlet, but to them, I was a gold mine that had finally opened for business. I never told them about the nights I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, crying from sheer exhaustion because I was too tired to drive the 5 miles to my apartment. I never told them about the panic attacks when I looked at my loan balance. I never told them that the doctor money was barely covering the minimum payments on the debt I had incurred to become a doctor in the first place. My colleagues would ask me, usually over lukewarm cafeteria coffee, "Your family must be so proud of you. Martin, are they coming to graduation?" "Yeah," I would say, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking the skin on my face. "They are really excited." I lied. I lied to protect them. And I lied to protect myself from the pity in my colleagues' eyes. Then came the graduation planning. It was 3 months ago. I was finally finishing. I had secured a position as a hospitalist. I was going to be a real attending physician. The light at the end of the tunnel was finally visible. I called a family meeting via video chat to discuss the logistics. I wanted to pay for their trip. I knew they would expect it. And frankly, I wanted to do it. I wanted to treat them. I wanted to show them that I could take care of them, that I was successful, that I was worthy. I want to fly you guys out, I said, my voice sounding tinny over the speaker. I will handle the tickets and the hotel. I expected a, thank you. I expected a, that is so generous, honey. Instead, my mother adjusted her glasses and looked at the screen critically. Well, if we are flying all the way to California, we cannot fly coach. Peyton, you know your father's sciatica acts up if he has to sit in those tiny seats for 5 hours. He needs legroom. Okay, I said, doing a mental calculation. I can look into Economy Plus. And Gemma wants to bring Tyler, my mother added. Ignoring my comment about Economy Plus, Tyler was Gemma's boyfriend of the month. He was a personal trainer who spent more time looking at his own biceps than he did looking at my sister. I had met him once. He had called me Doc with a smirk that suggested he thought my profession was a cute hobby. Mom, tickets are expensive, I said weakly. It is a celebration. Peyton, Gemma chimed in from the background. She was painting her nails. Do not be cheap. You are the rich one. Besides, Tyler has never been to the West Coast. It would be a great experience for him. And the hotel, my father said, leaning into the frame. Do not put us in some roadside motel. Your mother needs a proper bathtub, and we need 2 suites. Gemma and Tyler need their privacy, and we need ours. I sat there in my call room, wearing scrubs that had a coffee stain on the hem, listening to them design a luxury vacation on my dime. Business class, my father said firmly. That is the condition. If I am going to travel across the country to watch you walk across a stage for 10 seconds, I want to be comfortable. To watch you walk across a stage for 10 seconds, that was how he summarized the culmination of 8 years of grueling labor. 10 seconds. I could have said no. I could have told them to buy their own tickets. I could have told them that I was not a bank. But the old programming kicked in. The fear of the silence. The fear of the empty seats. Okay, I said. Business class. 2 suites. I will take care of it. Good, my father said, as if closing a deal. Make sure you send us the confirmation numbers so we can add our frequent flyer numbers. Just this once, I told myself after I hung up. Just this once. It is graduation. It is the biggest day of my life. I will pay the ransom, and then we will be even. I spent the next week picking up 3 extra overnight shifts to cover the cost. I walked through the hospital corridors like a zombie, my eyes burning, my body aching, fueled by the desperate hope that this money would buy the one thing I had never been able to earn their respect. I logged onto the Skycrest Air website at 2 a.m. I selected the flights: Cedar Hollow to Redwood Harbor, May 4th, returning May 10th. I selected the seats: first row of the business class cabin, lie-flat seats, premium dining, champagne service upon boarding. I added 4 passengers: Calvin Martin, Diane Martin, Gemma Martin, Tyler Vance. I entered my credit card information. My hand hovered over the purchase button. The total amount stared back at me. $14,240.50. It was the price of a decent car. It was the price of a down payment on a house in some parts of the country. It was more money than I had ever spent on myself in my entire life combined. I thought about the roof. I thought about the heating bill. I thought about the loans. I clicked purchase. The screen refreshed. Thank you for your booking. Your confirmation code is H7K9L2. I sat back in my chair, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the hospital cafeteria food. I felt hollowed out. I had done it. I had bought them. I opened the email confirmation. It was a beautiful, glossy email showing happy people drinking wine at 30,000 feet. I hit forward. I typed in my mother's email address. Here are the tickets, I wrote. Everything is taken care of. Can't wait to see you guys. I sent the email. I essentially handed them the keys to the vault. By sending them the full confirmation with the modification rights linked to the booking reference, I gave them total control over the asset I had just purchased. I did not think about that at the time. I only thought about how happy they would be. I closed my laptop and put my head in my hands. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I was $14,000 poorer, and I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, creeping dread. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping in beds they owned, with families who loved them for free. I turned away from the window. I had a shift starting in 6 hours. I needed to sleep. I needed to recharge so I could go back to the hospital and earn more money to fill the bottomless pit that was my family's affection. Little did I know, as I drifted into a fitful sleep, that the email I had just sent was not a ticket to my graduation. It was a blank check, and they were about to cash it in a way I never could have imagined. The memory of the day I handed them the tickets is etched into my mind with the high-contrast clarity of an MRI scan. It was 3 weeks ago. I had just come off a 24-hour shift in the ICU, my body vibrating with that dangerous mix of exhaustion and caffeine that makes your hands tremble and your heart skip beats. I should have gone to sleep. Instead, I drove 2 hours to Cedar Hollow. I had printed the itineraries on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. I had gone to a professional print shop in the city, because the printer at the hospital was always low on toner, and I wanted this to be perfect. I wanted the physical weight of the paper to match the financial weight of the gift. I placed them inside a thick envelope, the kind used for wedding invitations or legal summons. When I walked into the living room, the television was on. It was always on. My father was watching golf, a sport he did not play but enjoyed critiquing. My mother was flipping through a catalog. Gemma was curled on the sofa, her face illuminated by the blue light of her phone. "I have something for you," I said, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. I placed the envelope on the coffee table, right on top of my mother's stack of magazines. "What is this?" my mother asked, not looking up yet. "Open it." She picked it up, slid a manicured finger under the flap, and pulled out the cardstock. I watched her eyes scan the page. I watched for the widening, the gasp, the spark of genuine gratitude. "Oh," she said. It was a flat sound. "Skycrest Air, business class. That is nice. Peyton." She did a polite little clap, the kind one might give to a child who successfully tied their shoes. "Business class?" my father asked. His interest piqued only by the implication of luxury. He took the paper from her. He scanned the details. "Lie-flat seats. Good. My back has been killing me." He nodded. That was it. A nod. He did not look at me. He looked at the paper as if it were a bank statement he was approving. "Gemma," I said, desperate for a reaction. "You and Tyler are on there too. I got you the window seats." Gemma did not look up from her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen. "Cool," she mumbled. "Thanks. Pay." "The ceremony is on the 6th, I said, forcing enthusiasm into the room like I was performing CPR on a corpse. "My name gets called early, so we need to be at the arena by 8 in the morning. I made a reservation for lunch afterward at the pier." 8 in the morning, Gemma groaned, finally looking up with a grimace. "That is practically the middle of the night." "We will be there," my mother said, patting my arm with a hand that felt light and dismissive. "Don't worry so much. You look tired. Peyton, you should go home and sleep." I drove back to the city that afternoon. The entire drive, I felt a gnawing sensation in my gut. It was not hunger, it was instinct. It was the same instinct that told me a patient was crashing before the monitors started beeping. "They are not excited," my internal voice whispered. "They are treating this like a dentist appointment." But I suppressed it. I told myself I was being sensitive. Now, sitting in my dark apartment with my graduation gown hanging behind me like a shadow, I knew my instinct had been a warning I failed to heed. I looked at the folder on my laptop screen. Receipts. I opened the subfolder where I had dragged the audio file. The file was named Living Room Smart Speak May 04, 1430.wave. The timestamp was May 4th, 2:30 in the afternoon. That was exactly 10 minutes after I had left their house that day. I had driven away, and they had remained in the living room. I had bought that smart speaker for them 2 Christmases ago. My mother had complained she could never find a weather report. I set it up, connected it to my Amazon account because they did not have one, and enabled the drop-in feature in case of emergencies, a feature they never used. and likely forgot existed. But this file was not a drop-in. It was a triggered recording. The device sometimes activated when it heard a phrase that sounded like its wake word, recording snippets of conversation until it realized no command was coming. It archived them in the app history, a digital debris of their daily lives. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I needed to hear every breath. I needed to hear the frequency of the betrayal. I pressed play. For the first 3 seconds, there was just the sound of the television, the hushed commentary of the golf announcer, then the sound of a car engine fading in the distance, my car, then my mother's voice. It was crystal clear, stripping away the static of the distance. "God, she looks terrible," my mother said. Her voice was not the polite, airy soprano she used when I was in the room. It was lower, sharper. "Did you see those bags under her eyes? She looks like a raccoon." "She works too hard," my father's voice grumbled. There was the rustle of paper. He was still holding the itinerary I had printed on the expensive cardstock. "But at least she is paying up. Did you see the fare class J? That is full fare business. This ticket alone is worth $3,000. Can we trade them in?" It was Gemma. Her voice was bright, alert, completely different from the mumbled cool she had given me to my face. I checked while she was blathering on about the lunch reservation. Gemma continued, "Since she booked the flexible fare, we can change the destination without a fee. We just have to pay the fare difference if there is one." My heart stopped. Literally, it felt like the muscles seized in my chest. She had been checking the refund policy while I was standing there telling her about the ceremony. That was what she was doing on her phone. "Greece," my mother said. It was a sigh of longing. I saw the brochure on the counter. "The weather in Santorini is perfect in May. California is so foggy." "But what about the graduation?" my father asked. He did not sound concerned. He sounded like he was weighing a logistical hurdle. There was a pause. I could hear the clink of a glass. "Oh, Calvin, please," my mother said. "It is just a ceremony. She walks. They clap. It is over. We have been to her high school graduation. We have been to her college graduation. How many times do we have to watch her wear a robe?" "This is medical school, Diane," my father said. "It is a big one." "She is a big girl," my mother replied. "She does not need us holding her hand. Besides, she will be so busy with her doctor friends. We would just be in the way." "True," my father mused. "And I really don't want to sit on hard bleachers for 4 hours listening to speeches." "Exactly," Gemma chimed in. "Plus, Tyler really wants to go to a beach. He says California water is freezing. And honestly, is she even a real doctor? I mean, she is an internist or something, right? She is not like a surgeon." "Internal medicine is surgery's secretary," my father joked. They all laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. It swirled around inside my headphones, violating my ears. They were laughing at my specialty. They were laughing at the decade of my life I had sacrificed. "So, Greece?" my mother asked. "We can use the credit from these tickets. It should cover almost everything if we book the package deal." "But she will know," my father said. "The confirmation." "She won't check," Gemma said confidently. "She is so busy saving lives or whatever. By the time she notices, we will be back. We will just tell her the flight got canceled or something. She is desperate to believe us. She always buys whatever excuse we give her." "That is true," my mother said. Her voice turned sickly sweet, a mockery of affection. "Our sweet, gullible Peyton. She just wants to help." "Let her pay," my father said decisively. The sound of the paper rustling again. "She owes us. For the car. For the college tuition we helped with that one semester. Consider this interest." "Okay," Gemma said. "I am doing it now. Rerouting to Athens, connecting to Santorini, done." "She thinks we are actually going," my mother said. And then, the sound that shattered me, my mother laughed. It was not a chuckle. It was a full, deep belly laugh. She stood there with that envelope looking like a puppy waiting for a treat. I printed it on cardstock. It was pathetic. "Pathetic," Gemma echoed. The recording ended. I sat there in the silence of my apartment. The blue light of the laptop screen was the only illumination. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, a pale, hollow-eyed ghost wearing a graduation gown that suddenly felt like a costume. I waited for the tears. I waited for the sobbing, the hyperventilating, the breakdown that usually accompanied rejection. It did not come. Instead, a strange sensation washed over me. It started in my fingertips and moved up my arms, settling into my chest. It was cold. It was the temperature of liquid nitrogen. For 26 years, I had been operating under a false diagnosis. I thought the problem was me. I thought I was not good enough, not smart enough, not successful enough. I thought if I could just calibrate my achievements correctly, I could unlock their love. But the recording I had just heard was the lab result that proved my diagnosis wrong. The problem was not me. The problem was that I was trying to extract blood from a stone. I was trying to buy a product that they simply did not stock. They did not love me. They did not even like me. They viewed me as a resource to be mined, a gullible fool to be exploited. Pathetic, my mother had said. I took the headphones off and laid them gently on the desk. My hands were steady. The tremors were gone. I looked at the file name, Living Room Smart Speak May 04. 1430. Wave. I right-clicked on it. Wave. I selected Rename. I typed slowly, my fingers hitting the keys with deliberate precision. Evidence Graduation Day. I hit Enter, then I opened a new document. I did not title it Journal or Diary. I titled it Audit Log. I was no longer Peyton Martin, the daughter who wanted to be seen. That person died the moment my mother laughed on that tape. I was now Peyton Martin, M.D., and I was about to conduct the most thorough, invasive, and ruthless examination of my life. I was going to look at the books. I was going to trace every dollar, every lie, every manipulation. They thought I was a secretary. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I would believe the flight was canceled. They had made a critical error. They forgot that to become a doctor, you have to be excellent at one thing above all else, finding the root cause of the rot and cutting it out. I reached for the stack of credit card statements I had ignored for months. I reached for the bank records. Let's see what else you have been buying, I whispered to the empty room. The graduation was over. The residency was over. The lesson was over. The audit had begun. The morning after graduation. The sun rose over Redwood Harbor with an aggressive, cheerful brightness that felt like a personal insult. I had not slept. I had spent the hours between midnight and dawn staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional siren from the street below. My graduation gown was still draped over the chair, a black silhouette that looked less like a symbol of achievement and more like a mourning shroud. At 7 a.m, my phone chimed. It was an automated email from the medical school's registrar office. Subject official commencement photos are now available. I sat up. My body felt stiff, my joints clicking as I moved to the desk. I opened the link on my laptop. The gallery loaded, a grid of hundreds of thumbnails showing smiling faces, proud parents, and bouquets of flowers wrapped in crinkling plastic. I scrolled until I found myself. The photographer had caught the moment I walked off the stage, diploma in hand. In the background, the audience was a blur of faces, but because the resolution was so high, you could see the details. You could see the graduate behind me, a guy named David, being embraced by a woman who was clearly his mother, her face buried in his shoulder. You could see the family to the right, a father holding up a sign that said, "We are proud of you, Sarah." And then there was me. I was standing slightly off-center, looking toward the lens with a smile that I now recognized as a grimace. Behind me, the family reserved section was visible. The empty red velvet seats were dark voids in the sea of people. I looked like I had been photoshopped into a picture where I did not belong. I was a glitch in the algorithm of family happiness. I closed the tab. I did not download the photo. I opened social media. I needed to see if the bleeding had stopped. It had not. Uncle Ray's comment, "You are not even a real doctor," was still there, but now it had evolved. It was no longer just a comment. It was a rallying cry. 37 likes. I clicked on the number. The list expanded. Aunt Linda, Cousin Mike, my grandmother on my father's side, even a second cousin I had not seen since I was 12. They had all tapped that little heart icon. They had all looked at his dismissal of my life's work and agreed with it. It was a digital town square, and they were all throwing stones. I did not reply. I did not delete the comment. I did not block them. Blocking them would be emotional. It would be a reaction. And as of last night, I was done reacting. I was now investigating. I went to the kitchen and brewed a pot of coffee. I made it black, strong enough to wake the dead. I carried the mug back to my desk and set it down on a coaster. I pushed the graduation gown off the chair and onto the floor. I did not care if it got wrinkled. I opened my laptop. I opened my iPad. I set them up side by side, creating a makeshift command center. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice was raspy. "Let's look at the books." I opened my bank account history on the laptop. On the iPad, I opened my mother's Instagram account, Gemma's TikTok, and my father's Facebook page. I started with the most recent financial request, the heating bill. It was January 14th. I remembered the text vividly. My mother had sent a photo of the thermostat reading 50 degrees. "The furnace is dead. Peyton, we are freezing. Dad is trying to fix it. But we need a new blower. It is $2,000. I found the transfer in my bank statement. January 14th, wire transfer to Calvin Martin. $2,000. I turned to the iPad. I scrolled back on Gemma's Instagram. January. There were no photos of them wearing coats inside the house. There were no complaints about the cold. But on January 16th, 2 days after the transfer cleared, there was a post. Location, the Omni Grove Park Spa. It was a carousel of photos. The first was Gemma and my mother in plush white robes, holding cucumbers over their eyes. The second was a shot of a massage table. The third was a receipt for a mother-daughter rejuvenation package that Gemma had foolishly posted to show off the price tag, captioning it, "Treating ourselves because we deserve it." I zoomed in on the receipt in the photo. Total $1,850. The date on the receipt was January 15th. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. They had not been freezing. They had been sweating in a sauna. They had taken the money I sent to keep them warm and used it to pay for a luxury I had never once afforded myself. I took a screenshot of the bank transfer. I took a screenshot of the Instagram post. I pasted them side by side into a document I named Case File 01. Heating. I moved to the next one. March. My father had called me, his voice tight with stress. "The transmission on the truck is slipping. Peyton, I can't get to work. I can't get to the grocery store. It is dangerous." I had sent $1,500. March 3rd, wire transfer to Calvin Martin. I checked my father's Facebook. Nothing for March 3rd. I checked Gemma's TikTok. On March 5th, there was a video. It was a "Get Ready With Me" video. But in the background, my father was sitting at the kitchen table. He was holding his wrist up to the light, admiring something. I paused the video. I took a screenshot. I zoomed in. It was a watch, a large, silver chronograph with a blue face. I recognized the brand because one of the attending physicians at the hospital wore the same one. It was a Tag Heuer. I did a quick search for the model. Retail price, $1,600. I looked closer at the video. The truck, the one with the allegedly broken transmission, was visible through the kitchen window in the driveway. It was not in a shop. It was not on blocks. And later in the same video, my father stood up, walked out the door, got into the truck, and drove away. The transmission was fine. The watch was new. I added the screenshots to Case File 02 transmission. I was working with the efficiency of a pathologist performing an autopsy. Cut, weigh, measure, record. Next came the dental emergency. April, 1 month before graduation. Gemma had texted me a picture of her cheek, slightly swollen. Root canal needed ASAP. No insurance. Mom is freaking out. Need $800. I sent it immediately. You do not mess around with dental infections. I checked the dates. April 12th. I checked Gemma's Instagram. April 12th. evening, location the Velvet Room. A high-end cocktail bar in the city center, 40 minutes from their house. The photo showed Gemma and two friends holding martini glasses filled with clear liquid. They were smiling. Their mouths were open and wide, laughing grins. If she had just had a root canal that morning, her face would be numb. Her cheek would be swollen. She would be on antibiotics and painkillers, not drinking $12 martinis. The caption read, "White smiles, white wine, white lies." I stared at the caption, "White lies." It was right there. They were mocking me in real time, leaving breadcrumbs they knew I was too busy to follow. I added it to the file. Then, I went back to the graduation tickets, the Skycrest Air portal. I had already seen that they changed the destination to Athens, but I wanted to see the details. I wanted to see the mechanics of the betrayal. I logged in using the confirmation code. I pulled up the transaction history. May 4th, modification. Destination change, Cedar Hollow to Athens, fare difference. Paid, but there was another line item below that. Name change fee, $400. I frowned. Why would there be a name change fee if they were just rerouting the 4 tickets I bought for Calvin, Diane, Gemma, and Tyler? There should be no name change. I expanded the passenger manifest for the new flight to Athens. Passenger 1, Calvin Martin. Passenger 2, Diane Martin. Passenger 3, Gemma Martin. Passenger 4, Chase Miller. I froze. Tyler Vance was the boyfriend. Tyler Vance was the one I had booked the ticket for. Who was Chase Miller? I quickly opened Gemma's Instagram again. I scrolled to her stories, which were still active from the last 24 hours. There was a video of them on a boat in Santorini. Gemma was dancing, and behind her, holding a bottle of champagne, was a guy I had never seen before. He was tan, blonde, and definitely not Tyler. I searched the tagged users, Chase Miller. I clicked on his profile. His bio read, personal trainer, influencer, living life, one beach at a time. I pieced it together. Gemma had broken up with Tyler, or maybe just upgraded sometime in the last 3 weeks. And instead of telling me, instead of canceling the ticket, they had simply paid the $400 administrative fee to swap the name on the ticket I paid for. They used my money to fly her new fling to Greece. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. They had $400 to burn on a name change fee, but they needed me to pay for the heating bill. I sat back, my hands trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from rage. It was a cold, calculating rage. "You are not a family," I whispered. "You are a corporation, and you are embezzling." I had enough evidence to confront them. I had enough to make them feel shame, if they were capable of feeling it, but I was not done. I needed to know the full extent of the damage. I closed the social media tabs. I opened a new browser window. I navigated to the credit bureau website. I had not checked my credit report in 2 years. I had set up autopay on my student loans and my one credit card, and I assumed everything was fine. My score was usually in the high 700s. I typed in my social security number. I answered the security questions. Which of the following addresses have you lived at? What is the monthly payment on your Honda Civic? The report generated, a spinning wheel on the screen, then a dashboard. My credit score flashed on the screen. 640. I stared at the number. That was impossible. I had never missed a payment. I paid off my balance every month. I scrolled down to the open accounts section. Student loan servicing, in good standing. Chase Sapphire preferred, in good standing. Citibank Diamond preferred past due. Balance $8,400. I stopped breathing. I did not have a Citibank Diamond preferred card. I had never applied for one. I clicked on the account details. Opened October. 3 years ago. Primary account holder, Peyton Martin. Authorized user, Diane Martin. The room spun. 3 years ago, I was an intern. I was working 100-hour weeks. I remembered my mother calling me, saying she needed me to co-sign something for a car rental because her credit was frozen due to a glitch. I remembered signing a document she sent me via PDF. Too tired to read the fine print. She had not used it for a car rental. She had opened a credit card in my name, and then she had added herself as an authorized user. I looked at the transaction history for the card. It was a catalog of their lifestyle. Grocery stores, gas stations, Amazon purchases, Sephora, Nordstrom. They had been living off this card for 3 years. They kept the payments just high enough to avoid it going to collections, but low enough that the balance kept growing. They were treating it like a secondary income stream, and the address for the statements 14 Oak Lane, Cedar Hollow. They had the bills sent to their house. They were intercepting the mail. I never saw it because I never lived there. This was not just taking advantage. This was fraud. This was identity theft. My mother, the woman who had criticized my eyes on the recording, the woman who was currently sipping wine in Santorini, had stolen my credit score. I looked at the total balance again, $8,400, added to the $14,000 for the flight, added to the thousands I had sent for fake emergencies over the years. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I was a doctor. I dealt with trauma. I dealt with hemorrhage. I knew the first rule of stopping a bleed. You have to apply pressure. I picked up my phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. I opened the contact list and scrolled down to the letter M. Marilyn Ellis. She was a patient I had treated 6 months ago, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had come in for hypertension. We had talked during her exams. She had told me she was a forensic accountant and family law attorney. She had given me her card, joking. "You seem too nice. Dr. Martin, if anyone ever tries to screw you over, call me." I pressed the call button. It was 7:30 in the morning. She answered on the second ring. "This is Marilyn." "Marilyn," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "This is Dr. Peyton Martin. You told me to call if anyone ever tried to screw me over." "I remember," Marilyn said. Her tone shifted instantly from casual to professional. "What happened?" "I need to report a theft," I said, "and I need to restructure my entire life. When can I see you?" "I have an opening at 9, she said. "Bring everything." "I have receipts," I said. "I have everything." I hung up. I looked at the folder on my laptop. Receipts. It was full. I looked at the credit report. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was fully up now. The day was bright and clear. "Family time is the best time," my mother had written. I turned back to the computer and printed the credit report. The sound of the printer rhythmically spitting out the pages was the only sound in the apartment. "Enjoy Greece," I said to the empty room, "because when you get back, you are not coming home to a daughter. You are coming home to a plaintiff." I sat at my desk, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hold music of the Citibank fraud department. It was a cheerful, synthesized jazz loop that felt entirely inappropriate for a conversation about identity theft. I had the credit report printed out in front of me, the pages still warm from the printer. My highlighter was uncapped, ready to mark the casualties. When the representative finally answered, her voice was tired and transactional. "Thank you for holding. This is Sarah. I have your account pulled up. Ms. Martin, you are inquiring about the Diamond Preferred card ending in 4099. "Yes," I said. My voice was calm, the professional calm I used when telling a family that their loved one had flatlined. "I need to verify the authorized users on this account. I see one primary cardholder, Peyton Martin, and one authorized user, Diane Martin," Sarah said. "The account was opened online 3 years ago." "And the billing address?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That would be 14 Oak Lane, Cedar Hollow," Sarah replied. I closed my eyes. 14 Oak Lane, my parents' house, the house where I had slept in a twin bed until I was 18, the house where my graduation gown was currently not hanging because they were in Greece. "Sarah," I said, opening my eyes and staring at the wall, "I need to know if a physical card was issued for the primary cardholder, for me." "Let me check the log," she said. The sound of typing filled the line. "Yes, 2 cards were issued upon account opening. Both were mailed to the Cedar Hollow address, and a replacement card was sent to the same address last year when the chip technology was updated. They had intercepted my mail, It was a federal crime, but to them, it was likely just checking the post. They had opened the envelope, taken the card with my name on it, and likely put it in the kitchen drawer next to the scissors and the takeout menus, ready for use whenever the authorized user card was not enough. "I need to hear the last 5 transactions," I said. "Certainly. May 2nd. Cedar Hollow Gas and Go, $65. May 3rd. Cedar Hollow Wines and Spirits, $120. May 3rd. Amazon Marketplace, $400. May 4th. Skycrest Air, baggage fees, $150. May 5th. Uber International, $45. I wrote them down: gas, alcohol, random shopping, baggage fees for the trip I had already paid for, and an Uber in Greece. They were using my credit score to buy their daily bread and their holiday luxuries. "Freeze the card," I said. "Mark it as stolen," because it was. "I can do that," Sarah said. "I will also need to send an affidavit of fraud for you to sign." "Send it," I said. "But send it to my email. Do not mail anything to Cedar Hollow." I hung up. I did not feel relief. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. If they had a credit card, what else did they have? I looked at the credit report again. There was a hard inquiry from 6 months ago that I had glossed over in my initial panic. It was from a company called Vantage Property Management. I recognized the name. It was the management company for the luxury apartment complex in downtown Redwood Harbor where Gemma lived. When she moved in, she had told me that Dad had worked something out with the landlord and that her influencer brand partnerships were covering the rent. I had been proud of her. I had thought she was finally standing on her own 2 feet. I pulled up the website for Vantage Property Management. I found the tenant portal. I did not have a login, but I knew Gemma's standard password pattern. It was always some variation of her name and her birth year. I typed in Gemma M 1999. Incorrect. I typed in Gemma Star 99. Incorrect. I typed in Peyton Sucks 99. The portal opened. I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Of course, that was her password. It was a little inside joke, a digital middle finger every time she logged in to pay her rent. Except, looking at the payment history, she was not paying her rent. The ledger showed spotty payments, late fees. And then, at the bottom of the Lease Documents tab, there was a PDF file labeled Lease Agreement Signed, PDF. I downloaded it. I opened it. I scrolled past the standard clauses about noise and pets. I scrolled past the monthly rent amount, which was $2,400 more than my own rent. I got to the signature page. Tenant Gemma Martin. Her signature was a loopy, dramatic scrawl. Guarantor Peyton Martin. My stomach dropped. I had never signed this. I had never even seen this document. A guarantor is not just a reference. A guarantor is legally responsible for the entire lease if the tenant fails to pay. If Gemma stopped paying, or if she trashed the place, they would come for me. They would garnish my wages. They would ruin the credit score I was trying so hard to protect. I zoomed in on the signature next to my name. It looked like my signature. The sharp P, the crossed T, the loop on the N. It was my handwriting. But something was wrong. I zoomed in to 400%. The lines of the signature were pixelated in a way the rest of the document was not, and the edges of the ink were too smooth, too uniform. It lacked the natural pressure variations of a ballpoint pen on paper. It was a digital stamp, and then I saw it. On the tail of the letter Y in my first name, there was a tiny, microscopic hitch, a jagged edge where the line broke slightly. I opened my mental filing cabinet, searching for where I had seen that hitch before. Then it hit me. 2 years ago, I was post-call. Having been awake for 30 hours, I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to eat soup, when my mother called. "Peyton, honey," she had said, her voice frantic. "I need a favor. I'm trying to file the taxes for the family trust. A trust that contained maybe $500, and the printer is broken. Can you print out the signature page I sent you? Sign it, and scan it back to me. I just need it for the file." I was too tired to argue. I was too tired to ask why she needed my signature for a trust I had no access to. "Fine," I had said. "Send the PDF." I had printed it. I had signed it with a black gel pen. I had scanned it. And because I was exhausted, my hand had slipped slightly on the tail of the Y. I still had the file on my hard drive. I searched for Tax Doc Mom, PDF. I opened it. I placed the two windows side by side. The signature on the lease was identical to the signature on the tax document, every curve, every loop, and that tiny damning hitch on the Y. They had not just forged my signature, they had lifted it. My mother had engineered a scenario to get a high-resolution sample of my signature, cropped it, and turned it into a digital asset. They had been pasting my consent onto legal documents for 2 years. This was not just using my money. This was stealing my agency. They had turned my name into a rubber stamp that they could use whenever they wanted something they could not afford. I realized then that the system relied on a specific kind of trust. Landlords and banks assume that if they receive a PDF from a verified email address with a signature that matches the ID, it is legitimate. I checked the email address on the lease application. PeytonMartinMD@gmail.com. That was my email, but I had not sent it. I opened my email settings. I went to the Forwarding and Pop IMAP tab. There it was. A rule set up 3 years ago. Forward a copy of incoming mail to Diane Martin Family Yahoo.com. Mark starred as read. Move to archive. I felt the blood drain from my face. They had access. They did not just guess my password. They likely looked over my shoulder at some point, or I had logged in on their computer and forgot to log out. They had set up a rule to intercept specific emails, likely ones from banks, landlords, or credit bureaus, forward them to themselves, and then archive the original so I would never see it in my inbox. That was why I never saw the credit card statements. That was how they verified the lease application. They verified it for me. I was living in a house with glass walls, and I had handed them the Windex. I started saving everything. I created a new folder, File 03 Identity Theft. I dragged the lease into it. I dragged the tax document into it. I took a screenshot of the email forwarding rule. I took a screenshot of the fake signature analysis. I was building a fortress of evidence, but there was one more stone to turn over. I went back to my bank account, the primary checking account, the one my paycheck went into. I had always assumed this one was safe. I had a debit card. I had a PIN number. But looking at the transaction log now with my new, paranoid eyes, I saw a pattern I had missed. Every month, on the 1st, there was a transfer of $200 labeled External Transfer, P. Martin. I had assumed, in my haze of busy residency, that this was a transfer to my own savings account. I had a savings account with the same bank. I clicked on the transaction details. Destination account Capital One checking ending in 5521. Account holder Peyton Martin, Calvin Martin. My father had opened a joint account with me. Years ago, when I was 18 and heading to college, he said it was so he could send me money for books. I had forgotten the account existed. I had never used it, but he had not forgotten. He had linked it to my main checking account, and for the last 4 years, he had been siphoning $200 a month. $200, a small enough amount that it would not trigger an overdraft alert. Small enough that a tired resident making decent money might overlook it as a utility bill or a subscription service. $200 a month for 4 years. That was nearly $10,000. $10,000 stolen in slow motion. This was not a family dynamic. This was a parasitic infection. They had attached themselves to my financial arteries and were slowly draining me dry. Careful not to take enough to kill the host, but taking everything I had to give. I looked at the clock. It was 8:15. I had enough. I did not scream. I did not cry. I went into administrative overdrive. First, the email. I deleted the forwarding rule. I changed the password to a string of 30 random characters that I wrote down on a piece of physical paper. I enabled two-factor authentication, linking it to an authenticator app, not my phone number, just in case they tried to SIM swap me. Next, the bank. I called the fraud line again. I told them to close the joint account with my father immediately. I told them to unlink any external accounts. I told them to reissue my debit card and change my account number. Then, the credit bureaus. I placed a freeze on my credit at all 3 bureaus: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. No one, not even me, would be opening a new line of credit without a PIN number that existed only in my head. Finally, the landlord. I drafted a formal letter to Vantage Property Management, to whom it may concern. I am writing to inform you that the signature on the lease for Unit 4B at Redwood Heights is a forgery. I am not the guarantor for Gemma Martin. I did not sign this document. I am attaching an affidavit of identity theft and a police report number which I will be filing within the hour. You have 24 hours to remove my name from this lease, or I will include your company in the lawsuit I'm filing against the tenant for fraud. Sincerely, Peyton Martin, M.D. I did not send it yet. I saved it to the drafts. I wanted to hand-deliver it to my lawyer first. I sat back. The silence in the apartment was different now. It was not the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a vault door closing. I picked up a pen and a notepad. I wrote down a single sentence. I am not taking revenge. I am correcting the ledger. My family was in Greece, drinking my champagne, sleeping in my hotel rooms, thinking they had pulled off the heist of the century. They thought I was the mark. They thought I was the dumb, compliant daughter who would just work harder to fill the hole they dug. They were wrong. I looked at the folder of evidence. It was heavy with data. I was no longer just a doctor. I was the auditor, and the audit was closed. Now, it was time for collections. Marilyn Ellis's office was not designed to make people feel comfortable. It was designed to make them feel small. Located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Redwood Harbor, the walls were floor-to-ceiling windows that looked down on the city like a god observing an ant farm. The furniture was chrome and black leather, sharp angles and cold surfaces. There were no pictures of children or dogs on her desk. There was only a sleek computer monitor and a notepad. I liked it immediately. I did not want tea and sympathy. I wanted a scalpel. Marilyn did not stand up when I walked in. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk with a pen. She was a woman in her 50s with hair cut in a sharp, geometric bob and eyes that assessed my net worth in a single glance. "Dr. Martin," she said. Her voice was dry, like paper shuffling. "You said you had a theft to report." "I have a liquidation to conduct," I corrected. Sitting down, I placed the heavy stack of folders on her desk. The sound it made, a solid, heavy thud, echoed in the quiet room. I had organized the files overnight. They were no longer just screenshots and downloads. They were labeled, tabbed, and cross-referenced. Exhibit A: unauthorized credit lines. Exhibit B: forged lease documents. Exhibit C: misappropriation of funds, joint account. Exhibit D: wire fraud. The emergencies. Marilyn looked at the stack. She looked at me. A flicker of appreciation crossed her face. "I usually have to spend 3 billable hours organizing a client's mess before we can even talk," she said. "You have done the triage for me." "I am an internist," I said. "I like my charts clean." She opened the first folder. For 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the turning of pages and the hum of the building's air filtration system. I watched her read. I watched her eyebrows raise slightly at the credit card statements, then knit together at the lease agreement. When she finished the last file, the analysis of the digital signature forgery, she closed the folder and took off her reading glasses. "This is not just theft," Marilyn said. "This is systemic financial abuse, and given the digital forgery, we are looking at multiple counts of identity fraud, federal level, because it crossed state lines via the internet." "I do not want to put them in prison," I said. "Not yet. I want to amputate." "Amputate," she repeated, testing the word. "I want to sever every single legal and financial connection between myself and the entities known as Calvin, Diane, and Gemma Martin. I want my name off the lease. I want the credit card closed and the debt assigned to the authorized user. I want the joint account dissolved. And I want to ensure they can never open so much as a library card in my name again." Marilyn nodded. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "The credit card is the easiest part," she said. writing quickly. Since you have the affidavit of fraud and the proof that the physical cards were mailed to an address you did not reside at, Citibank will likely discharge the debt from your name and go after your mother. The joint account. You have already closed. Smart. She tapped the lease agreement, the document with my forged signature. This, she said, is the tumor. It is a forgery, I said. I have the proof. It is a forgery, Marilyn agreed. But it is a forgery on a binding legal contract with a property management company that is notorious for litigation. If we just claim fraud, they will fight us. They will drag this out for months while the rent piles up, and your credit score will tank in the interim. We need a faster exit. She flipped to the back of the lease, to the fine print that was printed in a font so small it looked like dust. She ran her finger down a column of text. Here, she said. Clause 14b, the guarantor liability extension. I leaned forward. What does it mean? It means, Marilyn said, her voice dropping an octave, that this lease has an automatic renewal clause. If the tenant does not give notice of intent to vacate 60 days before the lease ends, it renews for another 12 months. And here is the kicker. The guarantor, that is you, is automatically locked in for the renewal term unless the guarantor sends a separate, notarized notice of revocation of guarantee. Okay, I said. So we send the notice. Marilyn looked at her watch, then she looked at the date on the lease. The lease expires on July 1st, she said. I did the math. May, June, July, 60 days. That means the deadline to give notice was May 1st, I said. Technically, yes, Marilyn said. But look at the addendum they selected. Your family chose the flex date option. It gives a grace period for the notice up to 45 days prior to expiration, in exchange for a higher rent premium. She did the calculation on her notepad. July 1st minus 45 days is May 15th. I asked. No, Marilyn said. May 7th. Today is May 6th. My heart hammered against my ribs. Tomorrow. You have exactly until 5 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow to serve Vantage Property Management with a formal, notarized revocation of guarantee. If you miss that window by 1 minute, you are legally on the hook for another full year of rent. That is roughly $29,000. I stared at her. $29,000. On top of the $14,000 for the flight, on top of the $8,000 on the credit card. And here's the worst part, Marilyn continued, pointing to a checkbox on the document. They checked this box. Guarantor acknowledges that electronic notice is insufficient for revocation. You have to deliver the physical document, or a certified mail receipt, to the leasing office, but since time is short, personal delivery is the only safe bet. I can drive there, I said. I can drop it off? It is not that simple, Marilyn said. To revoke the guarantee under this specific clause without triggering a breach of contract lawsuit, you have to prove that the tenant, your sister, is aware of the revocation. We need to serve her notice that you are pulling out, so she has the opportunity to find a new guarantor. She is in Greece, I said. She is on a boat in the Aegean Sea. Marilyn leaned back, tapping the pen against her lips. If we cannot serve her physically, we need to prove constructive notice. We need to prove that she received the information and acknowledged it, a text message she replies to, an email she opens, a voice recording where she admits she knows. If I text her saying, I am canceling the lease, she will just ignore it. I said, they are ghosting me on purpose. They think I am just the bank. Then you need to make them answer, Marilyn said. You have 24 hours to get a confirmation from her, or you need to be prepared to pay that rent for a year while we fight the forgery in court. I looked at the window. I looked at the city below. I need to get them to acknowledge me, I whispered. Yes, Marilyn said. You need to corner them. I thought about the timeline. They were flying back on the 10th. That was too late. The deadline was tomorrow, the 7th. But wait, I looked at the flight itinerary in my mental files. I had booked them to return on the 10th, but they had changed the ticket. They had rerouted to Athens. Can you check if they changed the return date? I asked Marilyn. I have the login. I pushed the laptop toward her. She typed in the confirmation code. It looks like they kept the return date of the 10th, Marilyn said. But hold on. There is a note here from the airline. Passenger inquiry regarding earlier return due to medical issue. Medical issue? I asked. Probably a lie to waive a change fee, Marilyn said. But they have not booked it yet. I sat back. I could not rely on them coming back early. I had to do this remotely, or I looked at the lease again. Wait, does the notice have to be served to the tenant before I serve the landlord? Simultaneously is best, Marilyn said. But if you serve the landlord tomorrow with the revocation, and we include an affidavit stating that the tenant is out of the country and has been notified via all available electronic channels, it should hold up, but it is risky. If Gemma claims she never saw the email, a sympathetic judge might rule that you pulled the rug out from under her without warning. I do not care about a sympathetic judge, I said. I care about the $29,000. Then we go nuclear, Marilyn said. We prepare the revocation. I will have a courier ready to drop it at Vantage Property Management at 4:55 tomorrow. Between now and then, you need to send a notice of intent to terminate to your sister, your mother, and your father, email, text, WhatsApp, everything, and you need to save the read receipts. They won't read it, I said. They see a text from me. They think it is me complaining. They won't open it. Then give them a reason to open it, Marilyn said. She looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. You said you wanted to amputate, sometimes, to save the patient. You have to trick the body into accepting the shock. I nodded. I knew exactly how to do that. I will get them to open it, I said, and I will get them to acknowledge it. Good, Marilyn said. Now, about the credit card. I have the fraud affidavit here. Sign it. I signed. The pen scratched loudly on the paper. And the power of attorney, Marilyn asked. Did you ever sign one? I don't think so, I said. We are revoking it anyway, she said. A blanket revocation of any and all powers of attorney, medical proxies, and authorized user status. I am filing this with the county clerk tomorrow morning. It puts it on the public record. She stacked the papers together. It was a thick pile. It looked like a weapon. One more thing, I said. The Brass and Dover. Marilyn looked up. The steakhouse? Yes, it is the most expensive restaurant in the city. Private dining rooms. Soundproof. What about it? I need to book a room for the night they get back, the 10th. Marilyn raised an eyebrow. I thought you were cutting them off. I am, I said. But to make this stick, to make sure they can never claim they didn't know, I need to hand them the physical copies of these revocations. I need to look them in the eye when I tell them they are homeless and insolvent. That is dramatic, Marilyn said, and expensive. I will pay the deposit, I said. It will be the last thing I ever pay for. Why? Marilyn asked. Why not just mail it? Because, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. They think I'm a doormat. If I mail it, they will tear it up and say it got lost. If I serve them in a public place, with a witness, they can't deny it. You want a witness? I want a spectator, I corrected. I want you there. Marilyn smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since I walked in. It was a sharp, predatory smile. I charge $400 an hour for field work, she said. Worth every penny, I said. I will be there, she said. But get that electronic notice to your sister, today, or you are buying her an apartment for a year. I walked out of the office. The clock was ticking. I had roughly 30 hours to serve the notice to the landlord, and less time to get Gemma to acknowledge the end of her free ride. I took out my phone. I opened my email. I needed a subject line that would guarantee they would open it. I needed a bait so sweet, so irresistible, that their greed would override their caution. I typed the subject line, graduation surprise. Huge transfer incoming. I began to type the body of the email. It was a trap, a digital Trojan horse. Inside the email, hidden beneath a layer of promised money, would be the link to the document that, once opened, would log their IP address, their time of access, and serve as the constructive notice Marilyn needed. "You want money," I whispered to the phone screen. "I will give you a receipt." I hit send. Then I called the Brass in Dover. "Reservations," a smooth voice answered. "I need the executive private room for the evening of the 10th, I said. "For a graduation celebration." "Certainly. That requires a non-refundable deposit of $500. "Put it on the card," I said, reciting the number of my newly reissued, secure debit card. "And the name for the reservation." "Dr. Martin," I said. "And please set the table for 5. We will have a guest." I hung up. The stage was set. The legal paperwork was drafted. The trap was baited. Now, I just had to wait for the rats to bite. The text message I sent to the family chat was a masterpiece of brevity. It contained no accusations, no passive-aggressive emojis, and absolutely no hint of the legal guillotine that was currently hanging over their heads. "Dinner at the Brass in Dover. Private room. May 10th at 7 in the evening. My treat? To celebrate everything." I hit send and watched the screen. In my experience, guilt usually causes a delay in response time. If you possess a conscience, you hesitate before accepting a free meal from the person you just defrauded. You wonder if it is a trap. You wonder if you can look them in the eye. My phone buzzed 12 seconds later. "We will be there," my mother replied. "Can't wait to tell you about the trip. So glad you are not mad about the mix-up. Count me in," Gemma added. "I am starving for a good steak. Greek food is okay, but I miss American beef." "Dad says yes," my mother added a moment later. 12 seconds, that was the duration of their moral struggle. The phrase, "my treat," acted like a bypass switch for their brains, overriding any potential awkwardness about the fact that they had ditched my graduation to party on an island using my credit card. They saw the name of the restaurant, the most exclusive steakhouse in the city, where a ribeye cost $80, and their salivary glands took over. I did not reply. I simply hearted the messages. Then I scrolled to Uncle Ray's number. Inviting Ray was a calculated risk. He was the loudmouth, the heckler, the man who had publicly humiliated me on social media. But every courtroom needs a jury, and Ray, for all his bluster, was a coward when confronted with authority. I needed him there not to yell at him, but to use him as a barometer for the shame I was about to inflict. I typed out a separate message for him. "Uncle Ray, I saw your comment about me not being a real doctor. I am having a dinner to celebrate my graduation. I think you should come. I have invited the chief of internal medicine to join us. I think you should tell him your theories about my degree. Dinner is on me." He replied in 2 minutes. "Free food." "I am there. I will ask this chief guy a few questions. Don't worry." He thought he was calling my bluff. He thought the chief of internal medicine was a lie. Or that if he was real, Ray could out-talk him with his conspiracy theories and barstool wisdom. "Perfect," I whispered. I arrived at the Brass in Dover at 5:30 in the afternoon. 90 minutes before the reservation, I needed to prep the kill zone. The executive private dining room was a cavern of dark mahogany and burgundy leather. It smelled of old money, expensive cigars, and furniture polish. A long table dominated the center of the room, set with heavy silverware and crystal glasses that caught the dim light. "Is everything to your liking, Dr. Martin?" the maitre d' asked. "Almost," I said. "I need one extra chair." He looked at the table. "You have 6 settings, ma'am, for 5 guests and yourself." "I know," I said. "I want a 7th chair, empty, right there." I pointed to the spot directly across from where I would be sitting. An empty chair. "Yes, and please place a setting there, but no glass, just the plate." The maitre d' was a professional. He did not ask questions. He simply nodded and signaled a busboy. The empty chair was a psychological prop. When they walked in, they would see it. They would wonder who was missing. It would create a subtle, nagging sense of imbalance. It represented the seat I had stared at during my graduation ceremony. It was the ghost at the feast. "And the audio-visual equipment?" I asked. "Set up as requested," he said, handing me a remote control. The screen descends from the ceiling. I waited until the staff left. closing the heavy oak doors behind them. I was alone. I connected my laptop to the system. The screen purred and lowered, a white canvas against the dark wood paneling. I opened the presentation file I had spent the last 48 hours building. I had not used a standard template. I had designed it to look like a clinical morbidity and mortality review, the kind of presentation doctors give when a patient dies due to error. And the team has to analyze exactly what went wrong. Slide 1, the patient, the Martin family dynamic. Slide 2, the symptom absence. I clicked through the transition. A high-resolution photo of the empty family-reserved seats appeared on the screen. It was huge, blown up to this size. The little white cards with my name on them looked like accusations. I clicked again. Side by side with the empty seats, the photo from Greece appeared. My mother holding the champagne. The timestamp was highlighted in red neon. Graduation ceremony. May 6th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Santorini toast. May 6th, 10:05 in the morning. I tested the audio. I clicked the embedded file on slide 4. My mother's voice boomed through the restaurant's high-fidelity surround sound speakers. Is she even a real doctor? She is an internist or something. She is not like a surgeon. The clarity was terrifying. You could hear the ice clinking in her glass. You could hear the sneer in Gemma's voice when she replied. I adjusted the volume. I wanted it loud enough to rattle the silverware. I moved to the next slide, the cost of doing business. It was a spreadsheet, but not a boring one. I had color-coded it, red for theft, blue for lies, item winter heating bill, reality Omni Grove Park spa package. I had overlaid the bank transfer receipt with Gemma's Instagram post of them in the sauna. The visual evidence was undeniable. I checked the lighting. I dimmed the sconces so the screen would be the brightest thing in the room. At 6:15, the heavy door opened. Dr. Mateo Alvarez walked in. He was a man who commanded a room simply by existing, 60 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen everything a human body can do to destroy itself. He was the program director of my residency. He was the man who had taught me how to intubate, how to break bad news, and how to survive the worst nights of my life. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. "Peyton," he said, his voice warm but gravelly. He looked at the screen, which I had quickly blanked to a neutral title slide. He looked at the empty chair. He looked at me. "Dr. Alvarez," I said, extending my hand. "Thank you for coming." He took my hand in both of his. "You told me you were finally celebrating. You did not tell me you were conducting a tribunal." He gestured to the folder of legal documents sitting next to my plate. "It is a little of both," I admitted. "I needed a witness. Mateo. Someone they cannot gaslight. Someone they cannot dismiss as just Peyton." He nodded slowly. He walked to the table and picked up a place card. "Calvin Martin." He looked at the next one. "Raymond Halston." "I read the file you sent me," he said. I had emailed him a summary of the situation when I invited him. I did not want to blindside him. I respected him too much for that. I told him about the tickets, the fraud, the empty seats. I told him I needed him to be the anchor of reality in a room full of delusion. "And," I asked, feeling a sudden spike of anxiety, "do you think I am being too harsh?" Dr. Alvarez looked at me. His expression hardened. "Peyton, do you remember the lecture I gave during your intern year, the one about necrosis?" "Yes," I said. "Dead tissue must be removed, or it kills the healthy tissue around it." "Exactly," he said. "You have been living with gangrene for a long time. Tonight is just the amputation. I am here to make sure you hold the saw steady." He pulled out the chair at the head of the table, not the one I had assigned him, but the one usually reserved for the patriarch. "Where do you want me?" he asked. "Next to me," I said. "Facing Ray?" We sat down. The clock on the wall ticked toward 7. The silence in the room was heavy, charged with the static electricity of impending violence. At 6:55, my phone buzzed. "Marilyn Ellis. The courier is in the lobby of the restaurant. He has the package. He waits for your text. Me. Hold him until dessert. Marilyn Ellis." Understood. I am at the bar having a martini. Good luck. I put the phone face down on the table. At 7 o'clock exactly, I heard them. They were loud. I could hear Uncle Ray's booming laugh through the heavy door before it even opened. I could hear Gemma complaining about the humidity. The door swung open. They spilled into the room like a chaotic, colorful oil slick. My mother was wearing a new dress. I recognized the designer, and I knew exactly which credit card had likely paid for it. My father was sunburnt, his face a peeling shade of red. Gemma was glowing with a tan that cost $400 in change fees, and Uncle Ray was wearing a sports coat that was 2 sizes too tight. "Surprise!" my mother shouted, throwing her arms out as if she were the one hosting the party. They stopped. They saw Dr. Alvarez. They saw the dim lighting. They saw the giant projection screen, currently displaying a photo of a graduation cap and a stethoscope with the words Peyton Martin, M.D., in a stark, serif font. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The boisterous vacation vibe hit a wall of sterile, clinical seriousness. "Oh," my mother said, lowering her arms. "I didn't know we had company." "Hello," I said. I did not stand up. "Please, sit down." I gestured to the seats. "Mom, Dad, Gemma, Uncle Ray." I nodded to each of them. "Who is this?" Uncle Ray asked, jutting his chin toward Dr. Alvarez. "The boyfriend?" Dr. Alvarez turned his head slowly. He looked at Ray with the same expression he used when looking at a particularly unpromising X-ray. "I am Dr. Mateo Alvarez," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I am the Chief of Internal Medicine at Redwood Harbor. I am Peyton's program director." Ray blinked. He looked at me, then back at Alvarez. He deflated slightly. The fake doctor narrative was hard to maintain when the Chief of Medicine was sitting right there, radiating authority. "Oh," Ray said. "Right, the boss." "Please," I said again. "Sit." They took their seats. They looked at the menus. They looked at the empty chair. "Who is that for?" Gemma asked, pointing to the 7th seat. "Is Tyler coming? I told you we broke up." "No," I said. "Tyler is not coming. Chase Miller is not coming either." Gemma froze. Her hand hovered over her water glass. She looked at me, her eyes widening. She had not told me about Chase. She thought I didn't know. "That seat," I continued, my voice smooth, "is for the person who was supposed to be at my graduation. It represents the family member who actually showed up." "Peyton, don't start," my father said, opening his menu aggressively. "We are here to celebrate. Let's not ruin it with drama. The flight mix-up was unfortunate, but we are here now." "Yes," my mother said, reaching for the wine list. "Let's order some champagne. The expensive stuff. My treat, well, Peyton's treat." She giggled nervously. "Ordering can wait," I said. I picked up the remote control. "Before we eat, I have prepared a small presentation, a toast, of sorts." "A presentation?" Ray scoffed. "What is this? A board meeting? I came here for steak, not a lecture." "You said I wasn't a real doctor." "Ray," I said. "So I thought I would give you a case study. Doctors love case studies." I pressed the button. The screen flickered. Slide 1 appeared. The patient. The Martin family dynamic. "What is this?" my mother asked, her smile faltering. "This is an audit," I said. I clicked to the next slide. The massive photo of the empty seats loomed over them. "May 6th, I narrated. 2,000 people in the auditorium, 4 empty seats in row G. "We told you," my father said, his face flushing darker than his sunburn. "The airline messed up the dates. We thought the ceremony was the following week. It was a clerical error." "A clerical error," I repeated. I clicked the button. The Skycrest airlog appeared. The IP address, the modification history, user Gemma, date May 4th, action change destination to Athens. "Is this a clerical error?" I asked. "Or is this a manual rebooking made from the IP address of the house on Oak Lane?" Gemma shrank into her chair. She looked like she wanted to slide under the table. And this, I said, clicking again. The audio file icon appeared. I found this interesting, I said. A recording from the living room. Just after I gave you the tickets, I hit play. My mother's voice filled the room. Is she even a real doctor? She is pathetic. My mother went pale. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Dr. Alvarez, who was watching her with a look of absolute clinical disgust. You recorded us, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. That is illegal. You can't record people in their own home. Actually, I said, my voice calm, I own the device. It is registered to my account, and in this state, as long as one party consents to the recording and since the device is technically me listening, it is admissible, but we are not in court. Dad, we are at dinner. I looked at Uncle Ray. He was staring at the screen, mouth open. Uncle Ray, I said, you asked if I was a real doctor. Dr. Alvarez. Would you mind answering him? Dr. Alvarez leaned forward. He placed his elbows on the table and interlaced his fingers. I have trained over 500 physicians in my career. Dr. Alvarez said, Peyton Martin is in the top 1%. She saved a man's life last week while you were presumably typing comments on Facebook. She is not just a real doctor. Mr. Halston, she is a better doctor than you are a human being. Ray turned purple. He looked down at his empty plate. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. My mother was crying now. Not the soft, sympathetic tears she used to get her way, but ugly, panicked tears. Peyton, please, she sobbed. Turn it off. People are looking. Let them look, I said. You wanted to be seen, didn't you? You posted the photos. You wanted the world to see your vacation. I am just completing the album. I clicked to the final slide. It was the bank statement. The side-by-side comparison of the heating bill and the spa day, the transmission repair, and the Tag Heuer watch. $14,000 for the flight. I listed. $2,000 for the heater that never broke. $1,500 for the transmission that works fine. $8,000 on a credit card I didn't know existed. I stood up. This is not a celebration, I said. This is an invoice. My father stood up too. He was shaking. You ungrateful little, we raised you. We put a roof over your head. You owe us. I don't owe you a dime, I said. I have calculated the cost of raising a child in this county, adjusted for inflation, and then I subtracted the amount you have stolen from me in the last 4 years. I looked him in the eye. You are in the negative, Dad. Just then, my phone buzzed again on the table, a notification from my email. It was the final piece of evidence I had been waiting for. Sender Skycrest Air Security Team. Subject inquiry regarding flight modification. I picked up the phone. I read the email aloud. Dear Dr. Martin, regarding your inquiry about the modification to booking H7K9L2, we have confirmed that the change was made using the Manage My Booking feature. The user authenticated using the confirmation code you provided. The device used was an iPhone 14 Pro, registered to a user named Gemma Martin. I looked at Gemma. You didn't just change the flight, I said. You logged in as me. You impersonated me to the airline to authorize the payment for the fare difference using the card on file. My card. Gemma was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. I thought you wouldn't mind. You have so much money now, you're a doctor. I am a doctor, I said. And you are a felon. I looked at the door. And speaking of consequences, I said, I believe dessert is here. I texted Marilyn, send him in. The door opened. It wasn't a waiter with a cake. It was a courier in a uniform, holding a thick, sealed envelope, and behind him, walking with the confident stride of a woman who is about to foreclose on someone's soul, was Marilyn Ellis. My family looked at the lawyer. They looked at the courier. They looked at me. And for the first time in their lives, they looked terrified. The air in the private dining room of the Brass in Dover was not just cold. It was pressurized. It felt like the inside of a submarine that had dived too deep, the hull creaking under the weight of the ocean. threatening to implode at any second. To understand the full extent of their delusion, you have to look at how they behaved in the minutes before the first slide hit the screen. The projector was humming, a low-frequency drone, but they chose to ignore it. They chose to ignore Dr. Alvarez's steely gaze. They chose to ignore the empty chair. They fell back on their training. They performed. My mother, Diane, was the principal actress. After the initial shock of seeing Dr. Alvarez faded, she plastered a smile on her face that was so wide and so brittle it looked painful. She walked around the table, ignoring the fact that I was holding a remote control like a weapon, and leaned in to hug me. It was a performance hug. It was the kind of hug you give a distant relative at a funeral, all shoulders, no chest, a quick pat on the back to simulate affection without establishing contact. She smelled of expensive duty-free perfume and the stale, recycled air of a long-haul flight. "Oh, Peyton," she cooed, pulling back but keeping her hands on my shoulders, pinning me to the chair. "You look rested. Graduation must have been exhausting." She did not wait for an answer. She turned to Dr. Alvarez, smoothing her dress. "And you must be one of her professors," she said, her voice dripping with a charm that usually worked on car salesmen and waiters. "We are so sorry we missed the ceremony. It was a nightmare, a total administrative mix-up. The airline sent us the wrong dates, the wrong itinerary. We were at the airport in tears, weren't we?" Calvin, my father, who had been studying the wine list with an intensity usually reserved for scripture, looked up. He forced a chuckle, a dry, rattling sound. "Absolute chaos," he said. "We tried to call, but with the time difference and the reception, well, we knew you would understand. You are a practical girl. Peyton." "And honestly," Gemma added, finally looking up from her phone where she was likely deleting the photos of Chase Miller, "the live stream was amazing. I watched it on my phone. The Wi-Fi on the boat was sketchy. But I saw you walk. You looked great. The gown really hides everything." She gave me a tight, conspiratorial smile. "We were there in spirit. Pay, totally there." I looked at them. They were rewriting history in real time. They were building a fortress of oops and sorry and family love to protect themselves from the consequences of their actions. They truly believed that if they just smiled bright enough, the $14,000 and the fraud would disappear into the background noise of family drama. I did not scream. I did not argue. I did not explain that I had the IP logs showing Gemma logged in to change the flight. I simply lifted the remote control. "Sit down. Mom," I said. "We haven't ordered yet," she fluttered. "I think we should start with sit down." The command was not loud, but it had the cadence of a physician ordering a crash cart. It cut through the social pleasantries like a scalpel. My mother froze, blinked, and slowly sank into her chair. I pressed the button. The screen behind me, which had been displaying the neutral title slide, flashed. Slide 1. The Family Economy. Beneath the title was a simple, brutal graphic. It was a flowchart. On the left, a box labeled Peyton. On the right, 3 boxes labeled Diane, Calvin, Gemma. Arrows flowed from my box to theirs. Thick, green arrows representing cash, wire transfers, credit card payments, rent guarantees. There were no arrows flowing back. Beneath the graphic, in bold, sans serif text, was a single sentence. "This is what family looks like when you are the ATM." The silence in the room changed. It went from the awkward silence of a bad dinner party to the terrified silence of an interrogation room. My mother stared at the screen. Her neck flushed a mottled red. "What is this?" she hissed. Her voice lost its sugary coating instantly. "You made a PowerPoint for dinner." "I made a financial disclosure," I said. "Since you have been so involved in my finances, I thought we should review the quarterly results." "This is tacky, Peyton," my father grunted, refusing to look at the screen. "Talking about money in public, it is unseemly. Stealing is unseemly, Dad," I replied. "Auditing is just good business." I clicked the button again. Slide 2. The discrepancies. The screen split. On the left, A bank transaction from January. Transfer $2,000. Memo furnace repair. On the right. Gemma's Instagram post from the Omni Grove Park Spa. Date January 16th. Caption, sweating out the toxins. You said you were freezing, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You said the house was 50 degrees. You took my money I made working overnight shifts in the ICU, and you spent it on a hot stone massage. We were stressed, my mother snapped. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. You have no idea what it takes to run that house. Peyton, the furnace was acting up. We found a cheaper fix and decided to use the surplus for self-care. Is that a crime? Does a mother not deserve a break? You didn't ask for a break, I said. You asked for emergency aid. That is called fraud under false pretenses. You are spying on us, Gemma said, her voice shrill. She pointed a manicured finger at me. That is creepy, Peyton. You are stalking my Instagram. You are looking at Mom's credit card statements. You are obsessed. I am looking at my credit card statements, I corrected her. The card is in my name, Gemma. The debt is in my name. The credit score you are ruining belongs to me. I clicked again. The transmission repair versus the Tag Heuer watch, the root canal versus the martini night. Each click was a punch. Each slide stripped away another layer of their innocent mix-up narrative. Stop it, my mother shrieked. She stood up, reaching for her purse. I am not sitting here and being humiliated by my own daughter. We are leaving. You can leave, I said, but the show isn't over. I pointed the remote at the speakers. You asked if I was a real doctor, didn't you? Mom. You asked it in the living room, just after I handed you the tickets. I never said that, she denied immediately. I have always been proud of you. I tell everyone my daughter is a doctor. Let's check the record. I hit play. The audio file was crisp. My mother's voice, sneering and cold, filled the room. Is she even a real doctor? She's an internist. She is pathetic. My mother stopped moving. She stood there, half risen from her chair, her mouth slightly open. The denial died in her throat. She looked at Dr. Alvarez, who was watching her with an expression of profound pity. Then, the recording continued. My father's voice. Let her pay. She owes us. Consider this interest. And then, the final nail in the coffin. Doctors make good money. It will be useful for the whole family later on. She is a retirement plan. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a truth so ugly, it sucked the oxygen out of the room. My father slowly sank back into his chair. He looked old. All the bluster, all the head of the household arrogance, had evaporated. He looked like a man who had been caught stealing from the collection plate. Gemma started to cry. But as I watched her, I realized she wasn't crying because she had hurt me. She wasn't crying because she had missed my graduation. She was crying because she was looking at the screen, at the list of transactions, and she was doing the math. So what? Gemma sniffled, wiping her eyes carefully so as not to smudge her mascara. You are cutting us off just like that, over a flight. It is not about the flight, Gemma, I said. It is about the lease. The lease? She froze. The lease for your apartment, the one where you forged my signature as a guarantor. I didn't forge it, she lied, her eyes darting around the room. You signed it. You sent it to me. I clicked the remote one last time. Slide 3, the signature analysis. The magnified image of the digital stamp appeared, showing the pixelated edge and the hitch on the letter Y. That is a lift, I said. From a tax document 2 years ago. I never signed your lease, and as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, the property management company knows it. Gemma's face went white. But the renewal is up. If you pull out, I have to qualify on my own. Exactly, I said. And with your income history, you won't. You have 30 days to vacate. You can't do that, she screamed. I love that apartment. It has a pool, Mom. Tell her she can't do that. My mother didn't answer. She was staring at the table, her hands trembling. You are monsters, I said. The words came out calm, detached. You didn't raise a daughter. You raised a line of credit. You groomed me to be your safety net, and you hated me for it. We are family, my father whispered. It was a weak, pathetic defense. You don't do this to family. You are right, I said. Family doesn't do this. I looked at Dr. Alvarez. He had been silent throughout the presentation, a brooding sentinel at the end of the table. Now, he slowly pushed his chair back and stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the wood floor was like a gavel strike. He walked over to where my father was sitting. He placed both hands on the back of the empty chair, the chair I had set for the missing family member, and leaned in. I listened to that recording. Dr. Alvarez said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated in the chest. You called her a bad investment. You called her pathetic. He looked at my mother. In my department, we have a saying. The patient survived in spite of the treatment, not because of it. He looked at me, his eyes softening with a fierce, protective pride. Then he looked back at them, his face hardening into stone. Peyton Martin became a doctor. Dr. Alvarez said, enunciating every syllable. She became one of the finest physicians I have ever trained. She saved lives. She carried the weight of the world on her shoulders for 4 years. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And she did it all, he said. In spite of you. He sat down in the empty chair, claiming the space they had left vacant. He picked up his napkin and placed it on his lap. It was a gesture of finality. He was staying. They were dismissed. The presentation is over, Dr. Alvarez said to them. And I believe Dr. Martin has one final document to give you. My family looked at him, then at me. They looked at the screen, still glowing with the evidence of their greed. They looked small. They looked cheap. And for the first time, I saw them not as the giants who controlled my life, but as the parasites they truly were. The gaslighting had failed. The show was over. All that was left was the bill. The silence in the room was no longer just the absence of noise. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. The kind of silence that happens in an operating room when the monitor flatlines and everyone knows there is nothing left to do. Dr. Alvarez sat in the chair that had been reserved for my family. His presence a stone wall against their hysteria. Marilyn Ellis stood by the door, holding her briefcase like a shield. I reached into the leather tote bag I had brought with me. I pulled out 4 thick white envelopes. I placed them on the table with a deliberate slowness. Thud, 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 thud. They landed on the starched white tablecloth next to the untouched bread basket. What is this? My father asked. His voice was hoarse. The bluster was gone, replaced by a trembling wariness. This is your graduation present, I said. Or rather, it is my graduation present to myself. I pointed to the first envelope, the one nearest to him. That contains the confirmation of the closure of the joint checking account, I said. As of 9 o'clock this morning, the link to my primary income has been severed. The automatic transfer you set up 4 years ago has been canceled, and just to be safe, I have changed banks entirely. My father's face went gray. Peyton, you can't do that. That account that is for emergencies. No, I said. That account was for skimming, and the skimming is over. I pointed to the second envelope, pushing it toward my mother. This is the fraud affidavit regarding the Citibank Diamond Preferred Card, I said. I have formally disputed every charge made in the last 3 years. I have flagged the card as stolen and the authorized user as illegitimate. Citibank has already closed the account. They will be contacting you directly regarding the outstanding balance of $8,400. $8,000, my mother whispered. She looked at the envelope as if it were a bomb. I can't pay that. Peyton, you know I can't pay that. Your father is retired. We are on a fixed income. Then you should not have spent $400 on a tan, I said. Or $1,800 on a spa day, or booked a luxury trip to Greece on a card you did not own. But family, she cried out, the tears starting again. We are family. You don't send debt collectors after your own mother. Family does not steal my identity, I replied. Family does not intercept my mail. Family does not laugh about me being a retirement plan while I'm working 80-hour weeks to keep the lights on. I looked at Gemma. She was sitting very still, her eyes wide and terrified. I slid the third envelope toward her. It was the thickest one. "And this," I said, "is for you." Gemma didn't touch it. She just stared at me. "That is a copy of the formal notice I served to Vantage Property Management this afternoon," I said. "It states that the signature on your lease renewal was a forgery. It includes a sworn statement that I am not, and never have been, your guarantor." "Did you tell them?" Gemma stammered. "I did, and because the renewal deadline was today, and because without a valid guarantor, you do not meet the income requirements, the lease is void." I leaned forward. "You have 30 days. Gemma, 30 days to find a new guarantor, pay the full year up front, or vacate the premises. If you are not out by June 10th, they will begin eviction proceedings." 30 days, she screeched. "I can't move in 30 days. I have nowhere to go. My friend's my brand. I need that address." "Then maybe you should ask Chase Miller to move in," I said. "Since you were willing to spend $400 to fly him to Greece, maybe he can help with the rent." "You are ruining my life," she yelled. She looked at our mother. "Mom, do something. You told me she wouldn't do anything. You said she was too soft. You said she would just pay it if we cried enough." The room went dead silent. Gemma slapped a hand over her mouth, realizing too late what she had just admitted. I looked at my mother. "So that was the strategy," I said. "Bet on my weakness. Bet on my desperate need for your approval." My mother looked down at the table. She could not meet my eyes. "We just thought," she started, her voice trembling. "We thought you had plenty. You are a doctor. Doctors are rich. We didn't think you would miss it." "I missed every birthday," I said. "I missed every holiday. I missed sleeping. I missed having a life. I didn't miss the money. Mom, I missed the respect." I picked up the remote control one last time. I clicked back to the slide showing the Skycrest airlog, the IP address that proved the flight change was done from their house. "You thought I was stupid," I said. "You thought I was just the checkbook, but you forgot one thing. To get through medical school, you have to pay attention to the details. You have to notice the things that don't fit." I looked at my father. He was staring at the wall, defeated. "I tried to be the daughter you wanted," I said. "I tried to buy my way into this family. I spent $14,000 on a plane ticket hoping that for once you would look at me and see Peyton. Not a retirement plan, but you took the ticket, you took the money, and you went to Greece." I reached into the bag and pulled out the final document. It was not in an envelope. It was a single sheet of paper, stamped with the word "draft" in red ink. I placed it in the center of the table. "This," I said, "is a police report." They all leaned in. "It details the identity theft, the wire fraud, the forgery. It has the evidence attached, the IP logs, the signature analysis, the audio recording." My father looked up, panic in his eyes. "You are going to arrest us." "This is a draft," I said. "I have not filed it yet." I stood up. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. I felt light. For the first time in 26 years, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. "Here is the deal," I said. "The cards are closed. The lease is canceled. The accounts are severed. You will never ask me for a penny again. You will never call me for an emergency that isn't a life-or-death medical crisis. You will figure out how to pay your own bills." I looked at each of them. "If you do that," I said, pointing to the draft, "this stays in my files. But if I see one unauthorized charge, one opened letter, one forged signature, if I even smell a credit inquiry in my name, I will walk this document to the district attorney myself, and I will prosecute you with the same dedication I used to get my degree." I turned to Uncle Ray. He was shrinking into his ill-fitting sports coat, trying to become invisible. "Uncle Ray," I said. He looked up, startled. You had a lot to say on Facebook, I said. You had a lot to say about me not being a real doctor. I gestured to Dr. Alvarez, who was sitting comfortably, watching the proceedings with a look of grim satisfaction. Dr. Alvarez is the chief of medicine, I said. He is the authority. If you have any doubts about my credentials, now is the time to speak. Tell him I am a fake. Tell him I am not a real doctor. Ray opened his mouth. He looked at Dr. Alvarez's cold, hard stare. He looked at the stack of evidence on the screen. He looked at me. He closed his mouth. He looked down at his shoes. That is what I thought, I said. I signaled to the waiter who had been hovering nervously by the door. Check, please, I said. The waiter hurried over and handed me the leather folder. I didn't even look at the total. I pulled out my new debit card, the one they didn't have access to, and tapped it on the machine. Beep, approved. I said I would treat you to dinner, I said to my family, and I keep my promises. I looked at the food that had just been brought out, steaks that were getting cold, sides that would go uneaten. Enjoy the meal, I said. It is the last thing I will ever buy you. I turned to Dr. Alvarez. Ready to go. Mateo. After you, doctor, he said, standing up and offering me a respectful nod. I walked to the door. Marilyn Ellis opened it for me. A small smile playing on her lips. I paused at the threshold. I turned back one last time. My mother was weeping silently into her napkin. My father was staring at the draft police report as if it were a death sentence. Gemma was frantically typing on her phone, presumably trying to find a couch to sleep on. Uncle Ray was staring at the wall, and the empty chair, the one I had set for the family who should have been at my graduation, sat there, accusing them. They were finally sitting in the silence they had created. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say I loved them. I simply turned around and walked out of the private room, down the corridor, and out into the cool night air of Redwood Harbor. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and pavement and freedom. I was 26 years old. I was a doctor, and for the first time in my life, I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey to get here, but I'm finally living for myself. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and remember, never let anyone write your story for you.